Calaroga Shark Media.
Hey there, I'm Johnny Mac with, today's Daily Comedy News. I'm honest with you guys, it is a slow news day. It was like nobody announced anything. Jim Gaffigan in the headlines on a slow news day. He was recently on We Might Be Drunk with Sam Morril and Mark Norman, and Jim started talking about different audiences around the world, joking that Europeans are often a bit condescending, but Canadians were always there and had the U.S.'s back, but things have changed recently. According to Gaffigan, the Canadians were always like, we know it's not you, it's your government. Now the Canadians are like, we hate you. They're furious. Jim told a story. He went out to get some bourbon at a Vancouver whiskey bar. Jim explains, I like bourbon, and so I'm like, all right, I'm going to get a bourbon. And they tell him, no bourbon. I go, this is a world whiskey bar. And they're like, nope, we're not selling any American whiskey. And I go, so did you get rid of it? And they're like, oh, it's back there. We're just not selling it. Gaffigan added when he returned to his hotel, which was owned by an American company, he was able to drink some bourbon there. While we're being political, Tim Dillon was on CNN. He had some advice for the Democrats, saying you can't go to war with straight white men for 4 years and then ask why they didn't vote for you. That seems crazy. I've made fun of Meghan Markle a lot. I can't then go, why don't you think Meghan Markle's watching my special? I think you should have to pick your fights in a better way. Dillon talked about having J.D. Vance on his podcast. Dillon joked it was actually the goal and why I started comedy, J.D. Vance. I knew about him when I started out in 2010 and I had it all plotted out like a beautiful mind on the wall. Then he got more serious and said it was kind of fortuitous. We just have this podcast that's big and people listen to it. Trump understands the two cultural forces that I've seen in my lifetime that have changed the way people behaved, reality television and social media. He understands social media and using it to communicate. Now that we have phones, we're all starring in our own reality TV shows. He understands that, and he was able to utilize that understanding to connect with people in a way that Kamala didn't seem to understand. I felt like he just had the upper hand. Kamau Bell likes not having a boss and says, basically, nobody can fire me, so I feel free to say what I want to. Now, having said that, maybe I won't get hired by anybody again, but there's two things that are important. One, making sure my family eats every day and has a place to sleep. And two, making sure I'm clear about which side of history I'm on. Send your letters to Kamau Bell, Tim Dillon, and Jim Gaffigan. Digital Spy caught up with Jimmy Carr. Jimmy said, pornography is to sex what clips of comedy or to seeing a show. You can watch something on TikTok and go, no, that's not very good. But you watched it with the sound down, reading subtitles while going to the bathroom, paraphrasing. You didn't get the full effect. Jimmy's comedy inspirations. I always liked wordplay and clever stuff. Culture lags behind technology. VHS was a huge thing for me. In the early 80s, would start to see tapes of Robin Williams, who'd been on Mork and Mindy. Suddenly, you could see him live talking about his cocaine addiction, and as a kid, you'd go, who the F is this guy? Who does Jimmy Carr think is the GOAT of comedy? Think about it for a second. Interesting pick here. Jimmy Carr says, Chris Rock for me is the GOAT because if you look at Bigger and Blacker, it all stands up. Those routines don't just stand up. They're still edgy now. It's extraordinary. Most comedy rots. It goes back to the pot, and that's great. But every now and then, someone just comes along and nails it. Jimmy, what made you want to be a comic? I think a lot of people who suffer a little from depression self-medicate with comedy. I was using it and decided to become a dealer. I like that. That's funny. I often think of myself like a drug dealer. You're dealing in serotonin and dopamine. You experience it most when you're in a group of other people. When you're laughing together, you laugh, I think, 30 times more. Jimmy talked about growing up. I look back at school and everyone was hilarious. I didn't stand out as being the funny kid. I could definitely hold my own, but everyone was fun. Why else would you be friends with someone if they weren't a laugh? That was the currency, certainly in my home. There's a lot of mysticism around comedy, like he's just funny, he just gets up there and does it. No, when I watch Chris Rock do a special, I see 100 jokes that work brilliantly, but what I don't see is the 2,000 jokes that didn't work that got him to those that did. He had to put the work in. You don't have this in music. The Beatles aren't any less magical because you can write down the tunes and analyze the notes. I think we should teach comedy like we teach music. Now, Digital Spy had a good follow-up here. You do get musical prodigies. You can teach people to write songs, but you can't teach them to be Paul McCartney. Jimmy Carr said, that's true. But he makes my point. He was in a covers band with his friends, the Quarrymen. They were fine. Then he did 10,000 hours work in Hamburg, and suddenly his facility with melody was revealed. And what joke do you wish you had written, Jimmy Carr said. Anthony Jeselnik has a routine about modern-day slavery that I don't think you should print, but it's a remarkable piece of work. I'd really encourage people to check him out. Shane Gillis is everyone's discovery of the last 12 months, an extraordinary talent at sketch and stand-up. Beth Stelling I absolutely love, and check out Neil Brennan's special. Neil makes me want to be a better comic. Wow, high praise from Jimmy Carr, who's one of the top comedians out there today. Colin Jost was at Brown University. They had a panel and asked Jost about comedy, and Colin said, I hope it's something you can improve, that you can get better at. I hope I get funnier. I don't know. Maybe we can all agree to meet here in 10 years, and I can report back on whether I feel like I'm funnier than I am now. Steve Martin and Martin Short had some of the best comedy careers in history. They're some of the funniest people I've ever met, and they're still worried about, am I still funny? Am I still making good work? If you're a certain kind of person, whatever field you work in, that feeling never leaves you. All right, some quick notes. The New York Times did it's not a profile of Theo Vaughn. They did an article about Theo Vaughn explaining to people who don't know who Theo Vaughn is. I don't think Theo participated in it, but it's a lengthy piece, so Theo will be on people's radar. Jimmy Kimmel will get a 4th season of Who Wants to Be a Millionaire. It is the 2nd time Kimmel will host the show in front of a live studio audience. The first 2 seasons of the reboot were during COVID protocols. If you missed it, Andrew Santino has a new golf podcast. It's called No Bad Lies. That's a good title. It includes on-course conversations and in-studio interviews with professional golfers, athletes, entertainers, and influencers. Santino said, I'm beyond excited to dive into all aspects of the game with no bad lies, from live to the PGA and everything in between. There's so much happening in golf right now. I can't wait to explore the sport from every angle with the people who love this game as much as I do. Damon Wayans is one of the latest people to accuse Robin Williams of being a joke thief. I think that's reasonably well known. Damon had been on Shannon Sharpe's podcast before the recent Shannon Sharpe controversy. You can Google that one on your own. I don't want to go there. And said Robin Williams was a notorious thief. I ain't lying. His manager used to walk around with a checkbook, and Robin would come off stage and a comedian would be like, hey, he just took me, and he'd write him a check for $75 because he knew Robin was all stream of consciousness and he'd steal material. It was known. Comedians would go, I'm not going on because Robin's here. It happens, but I always look at comedy like this. If this is not the last joke I'm ever going to tell, then I'm not going to treat it like that. Just a joke. Means I got to think of something else for people to be up in arms about a joke. Really? What is the joke? Last year, Joe Rogan commented on Robin Williams and said, I think Robin wanted to kill more than he wanted to be ethical at any cost. Part of that manic sort of style is this constant need to have a bit about anything that you're talking about ever. Killing was more important. Filling that hole inside of him was more important than anything. If you ask any of those comics from back then, there were always instances of Robin going on a talk show and doing your bit. Speaking of joke thieves, stay with me. Sarah Silverman spoke to The Guardian, and she tells a story. My parents were dying. I was living in their apartment and taking care of them. So when I went back to stand-up, the first material I tried out was stolen from my eulogy at my dad's funeral. I thought, there's funny stuff in here. In her new material, she is working through the death of her parents and explains there was one night when I hid notes for myself all over the stage. I'm a stoner. I don't have to remember what happens next. And I was in a pretty heavy part of the show looking down at my notes. It was taking a few seconds, so I said sorry to the audience, and they all started applauding because they thought I was overcome with emotion and apologizing for it. I probably should have just gone with it, but I was like, oh no, I'm not crying. That's your Slow News Day comedy news for today. See you tomorrow.